I see these particle board dressers on Marketplace all the time. Most people pass them up, but I actually think they are perfect for some pretty incredible transformations. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how. Let's go pick up our project for today. Oh my gosh, I got it. Now I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do about the drawers. If anybody's wondering, the reason I hauled it out without the drawers is because it was too heavy for me to do it alone. So now I'm gonna have to Tetris these all. Sorry for the mess, kids. Thank mercy, we are done. Whew, snug as a bug. Now it's time to haul it all home. This piece was very dirty. There were a lot of mystery materials and liquids that had made the particle board raise in lots of spots, so those will all need to be repaired. There was also a bit of damage on the drawers and some grime, but it wasn't near as bad as the top, thankfully. So let's get started. The first step with any project is always to give it a very good clean. I use TSP Substitute. I pour a little bit in a water container and dilute it and spray it on and scrub it. We just want to make sure it's totally clean before our next step. Now that it's all dry and clean, we can get a better look at all of the areas that we're going to need to fix. These are all raised areas from the particle board soaking up moisture that was sitting on it for too long. Always remember to clean the inside of the drawer as well, and also an important thing to remember is to clean underneath the dresser. There's usually bugs and cobwebs. While you're cleaning, you're going to notice all the things that you need to fix, so it's an important step for that reason too. I found a chip off the side here, but it's a quick repair. I just apply some glue, and in this case I'm pounding the little spot back in like a puzzle piece and then securing it with tape. Before you clean the drawers, you need to remember to take the handles out, not just for the cleaning purposes, but obviously you're going to be painting it. And for this dresser, I'm probably not going to have those holes in the same spot for the end result. When I'm working with particle board dressers, I always make sure to tighten all the screws on the drawer and also the frame. Also the bottom part of the drawers, even though people aren't really going to see that too much when they're pulling the drawer in and out, I just don't like that exposed, so I'm going to fill that up with Bondo, and by the end it will look like everything else. This has some wiggling, so I'm going to be putting some glue in the edges there. Now we're ready for our next step, which is scuff sanding. We do this to rough up the slick surface and give it some more grip. But in this case, there's also a lot of work to be done on sanding down all of the raised areas from the moisture damage. Since I'm inside doing this project, I'm using my vacuum cleaner and also using an air purifier. I wanted to speed the work along, so I got out my DeWalt orbital sander and my favorite sanding disc. They're ceramic discs. All of the debris flows through it, so there's no buildup. They work a lot faster and are much stronger. All of the products I'm going to be using today and tools will be listed down in my description, as well as my link to my Amazon storefront, where I have over 80 products so far and adding all the time. It's normal to reach those little particle board areas when you're sanding it down totally flat again. That's just part of the process, and we're getting it ready for our next step, which is wood filler. On the surface level damage, I'm using a putty by Bondo. It dries very quickly and it sands very easily and smoothly, so it makes for quicker work. Here's our little damage spot from the side. I make sure to sand it down really smoothly, and then it's kind of a funny optical illusion because it looks like it's dipping down, but as you see here from this side, it's perfectly flat, so I'm going to fill that up too. I'm also applying it to the trim on the front and also any areas on the drawer front that have superficial damage as well. I was going to use one of my favorite wood fillers, but I opened it and there was air in there apparently. That happens sometimes when you get these dents on and the lid can't go on correctly. But, I mean, at least I can show you how solid it gets when it dries. The blue stuff is the hardener. It's going to start hardening really quickly, and I'm going to go over the indents and the hole. I didn't put tape underneath it, but that is a good idea to do so it doesn't blob out the bottom. I'm also going to fill up this exposed particle board underneath because I don't like that. It was a pretty big mess in my living room by the end of the day, but we got all the wood filler done and now it's going to sit overnight, and I'll see you guys in the morning. Good morning, everybody. Today is Saturday, which means I don't work at my regular job today, so I'll have several daylight hours to work outside and do some sanding and make progress on that. Another exciting thing today is that my grandpa, who is in his 90s, is getting married again today, so shout out to Grandpa, congratulations. After sanding down repaired areas, I always like to make sure that I check everything to make sure it's nice and level with my hand. Okay, this is my favorite primer. You've probably seen it a million times if you watch this channel very much. It's shellac base and it adheres to like everything. It sands very easily afterwards, kind of like the red Bondo I was using sands down. It just turns to powder very easily. This kind of primer serves multiple purposes. It has great adhesion to many surfaces, so it makes sure that when you paint over it, the paint is nice and stuck. It also creates a coating over the different materials we use, like the wood fillers and the sanded areas, so that it doesn't show up later in the paint. It blocks in the particle board from future water damage, and if you're working on wooden furniture, it blocks in the wood tannins, and it blocks odors as well. This is a difficult primer to use in a spray gun, though. I found that out the hard way years ago. It does not clean with water, it just curdles when you try to do that, so you have to use things like acetone or denatured alcohol to remove it from a spray gun. However, I did see the other day, I was watching Furniture Flipping Teacher, if you guys like watching her, and she said that they have a new bin shellac that is water-based, which is a game changer because you can put it in a spray gun, so I'm going to have to use that in the future. I also always overlap from the last row's edge to make sure that ridge is nice and smooth down. Make sure you check for any dribbles over the side so you don't have to sand those down later. Where the holes used to be for the handles, you cannot tell at all anymore. So that Bondo is really great for that. Just what I like to do is check with my hand to see if there's any dip down or if there's any Bondo over top that needs sanded down a little more. Your hand will help you detect stuff that your eyes can't see. Update on the glue seams that I did. There is absolutely no moving, going back and forth, so did the trick. And here's the wiggly base trim piece that I showed you in the beginning, all nice and secure. The second layer is done and dried for the proper amount of time, and now it's time for a quick sand down with 220. Here's that corner that I had to do a lot of sanding on, so it's good as new. And then over here, the area that had all of those dots, nice and smooth and ready for paint. All right, y'all, here's the trim section. I like to go over with everybody what you're looking at here. So we have pieces of MDF trim, and then we're going into PVC, which is kind of like a plastic, and then this is plastic like PVC made to look like wood. Then you have real wood, more real wood, and then this is pressed fiberboard with primer on it. Now that I've picked out my trim, I'm going to go home and work on some designs. I was really having a hard time with this one. Usually I'm working on a vertical dresser, but this was horizontal. So 6 drawers to cover, so lots of options to choose from. With every project I do, I always draw out plans before I decide on a final look, but especially when I'm working on trim, I do a lot of options in my head. So I'm going to draw them out and number them. I'm only going to be drawing half the dresser for design, just for the sake of saving time. And I want to know what you guys think when I'm done. What number is your favorite and what would you like to see recreated? Once I get these all exactly as I want them, then I'm ready to start drawing on the drawers. Okay, so I'm about to make my boxes. I don't know if I want to go about 9 inches on each to have enough space in the center to make one knob, or if I want to go about 10 inches, have a smaller area in the center and 2 knobs on each drawer. When I'm doing trim, I always make sure I put the ruler from one side to the next and measure across instead of doing the drawers separately, because that would create some irregularities in where the trim meets up. Something to know about the knobs: whenever you're making new trim shapes, it's going to shift where the knobs are going to go. What I mean by that is you can choose to have it be actual center for the drawer itself, or you can choose to have it be center of the shape you've made. Here, I've got the border equal, so finding the center is simple there, and it's the center, but it's also the center of the drawer itself. Here, I have the borders here, but not down here to bring it up to center. So if I were to measure here and here, the center knob for the shape I've made would be about here. If I were to measure for the actual drawer borders, the center for the knob would be about here. This is going to be close to the border I'm making with the trim, so it's going to look bunched up. So I have to decide if I want it to be true center for the drawer itself or center for the shape I'm making and what looks better to me. I've done it where I've left it in true center and it's just closer to the border. I've done it where I've brought it down just enough but not too much. So it just depends on what you want to do. Now it's time to work on the trim. These are called miter shears. I purchased mine on Amazon. I'll have a link in the description for you to follow to purchase them. So you toggle the direction you need to go. That would be the opposite direction for this cut. So this is the 45 we need it to be on. We place it against the border here, the guide, and bring the mark up to center there. Make sure we have it against the guide, because if it is not against it, the angle will be off. That's it. It's really easy to get off any little bits here. Well, this is just 220. Bring the mark up to middle and cut. I love this because it helps it be like exact, or at least as close as possible. Just double check that it meets there, and then we number it. Now it's time to get all the pieces in place. I usually use Titebond wood glue or Gorilla wood glue. I press it in place and clean up any bits that have smushed out the sides, and then tape it in place to be drying overnight. I like to have the pieces stuck in place before I use my brad nail gun, just so that when I apply pressure with the nail gun, they don't slip around. It's important to double check your brad nail size before you start on your project. I've picked too long before where it was sticking out the other side, and too short where it didn't go into the surface of the drawer far enough. So now I double check. I bought this Ryobi brad nail gun for myself and I really love it. It's one of my favorite purchases ever. Super easy, you just put the brad nails in, make sure the head of the nail is on the top, push it in, and you're good to go. There are other options too, like I used to use this Stanley brad nail gun. It's corded, but it does a great job and it's not very much money. Here's a little knob to adjust how much force the nail will shoot in at, whether it's a softer material you're shooting into or a harder material. Next, I apply the wood filler to where the trim meets and the holes. I like to use non-shrinking wood filler so you don't have to go over it multiple times. Other wood fillers will dip down when they dry and you have to do it again. After a whole lot of wood filling, this is what it's looking like and it's time to do some sanding. Then instead of taping off all the drawers, I decided to make a cardboard border to reuse on each drawer when I use a spray primer. I opted to use Zinsser bin spray primer for the trim just because it's easier to use around trim and I was short on time. One of the great things about using a spray primer is that it leaves almost no texture once it dries, so it's very little sanding. I wanted to show you the trim here where it meets the drawer. It needs to be a nice transition for the paint finish. I'm going to be using the color Nicolson Red by Benjamin Moore. It's this really beautiful, moody, reddish brown color. It's an enamel, so it's very strong, so we're not going to be using a top coat today. For the small areas and details, I'm going to be using synthetic bristled brushes. I have a high quality one here, but my very favorite are Zebra brand brushes. I've never tried one that I don't love. And then for the big areas, I'm going to be using a high density foam roller. My favorite brand is Whizz. I always go thin on the first layer of paint, and that's to avoid brush strokes and drips. It's going to look kind of patchy and chaotic on the first layer, but it's going to have a nice smooth finish once it dries. And then it will all come together after the second layer is down. The first layer is always going to look rough. If I look from this side here, you'll be able to see how smooth it is. On to the top. So I'm switching over to my foam roller. It's pretty simple. You want to saturate the area first, work in one strip at a time or two, just a workable section. I'm going to get the area covered first, trying not to squish it too hard on the edges because it will blob over the sides. Again, it's going to be patchy. We're avoiding texture by going thin. A little bit there. Okay, so once it's down, that first layer, trying to smooth out those little edges there. They're going over. Okay. Then you want to pop the little bubbles. So you have almost no pressure on it at all. Get a little more there. Almost no pressure at all. Go back and it pops those little bubbles that remain there, and then you just leave it and it will self-level. If you overwork it past that and you keep on trying to get it smoother, as it's setting up, you will create more texture because the paint's trying to dry, then you're agitating it. So you just apply the layer, go over it once or twice, then let it sit and move on to the next layer. And remember to catch any drips on the edge so they don't show up later. And that's it. This is a pretty close up of the wet paint here. I just wanted to show you the texture a little bit before it starts settling. And in this big dry area, how smooth it gets. I did a very light sand before this second layer on the top only, and it's optional depending on how smooth you want it. I also like to paint the rim underneath for the same reason as cleaning up cobwebs and bugs, is because people will see the underside when they haul the furniture off, so I just like to make it nice and clean. It was hard with my phone trying to capture the actual color of this dresser, but the color is so rich and so beautiful, and now all that's left is to put the knobs on and dress it up. Let's take one more look at where it started. Lots of stuff to fix, lots of grime and gross stuff, and just your basic particle board dresser, and now it's a showstopper. I hope you guys like this project. I was really happy with how it turned out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe, like, and comment down below. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll see you in the next video here on The Refurbished Life. Hey guys, thanks for watching today's video. If you're curious to see more projects with trim detailing, or want to know how to work on particle board furniture and what products to use, these two videos are going to be perfect for you. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you next time.